Taehyung has officially returned to Korea. And the reaction from Jungkook is something no one was prepared for. The moment he appeared, fans froze, cameras went crazy and social media exploded in seconds. Some say Jungkook's expression said everything: shock, excitement, and maybe something deeper that fans can't stop talking about. Was this planned? A coincidence? Or something much bigger happening behind the scenes? Stay right here, because what happened next sent the entire fandom into chaos. Jungkook stood frozen for a second, almost as if his brain needed time to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. Taehyung, after months away, was suddenly there, walking through the arrival's gate with his calm posture, signature walk, and that soft, familiar smile that always made everything feel strangely comforting. Armies around them started screaming louder, but surprisingly, neither of them seemed bothered. If anything, it looked like the noise disappeared for them. It was just Jungkook and Taehyung facing each other again. Jungkook took a few slow steps forward, his expression unreadable. Taehyung's eyes softened as if he already knew exactly what Jungkook was thinking. "Long time no see," Taehyung said quietly once Jungkook was close enough. Jungkook let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Too long. There was a moment. Just silence, but meaningful. The kind of silence two people only have when they've shared years of memories, music, laughter, arguments, and a bond that never really faded no matter how far they traveled. Taehyung's luggage rolled to a stop beside him, but he didn't seem to care. He was too focused on Jungkook's expression, one filled with relief and maybe a hint of disbelief. "You didn't tell me you were coming back today," Jungkook finally said. Taehyung shrugged lightly. "I wanted to see your reaction." Jungkook scoffed, half annoyed, half amused, but his smile was impossible to hide. "You're unbelievable," he muttered. Taehyung tilted his head slightly. "But you missed me." Jungkook didn't answer, but the way he looked at Taehyung said everything. A staff member approached to guide them out, but Taehyung gently tapped Jungkook's sleeve and leaned closer. "Let's go home," he said softly. For the first time in months, Jungkook nodded. Not as an idol, not for the cameras, but as someone who had waited long enough. Together they walked forward side by side, while the entire arena of fans screamed, cried, and recorded every second, fully aware they were witnessing a moment that would be talked about for a very, very long time. As they exited through the final security doors, the noise outside grew even louder. Fans pushed closer to the barricades, reporters called their names, flashes burst non-stop, yet somehow the world felt strangely quiet around them. Taehyung adjusted his mask, but Jungkook noticed something familiar in his eyes, tired but warm. The same look he used to have after long rehearsals or late-night studio sessions. A staff member hurried them toward the van waiting just outside. Jungkook opened the door first and motioned Taehyung in. A small gesture, but one that didn't go unnoticed. Taehyung's eyes softened again before he stepped inside. Once the door closed behind them, the chaos outside became muffled. Silence filled the van, not awkward but thoughtful. Taehyung leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Feels strange." "What does?" Jungkook asked, turning slightly toward him. "Being back," Taehyung replied. "Everything looks the same, but it feels like something changed." Jungkook nodded, staring at his hands for a moment. "A lot changed." Taehyung watched him carefully. "Including you." Jungkook's lips curved slightly, not a smile but an acknowledgement. "I had to." For a few seconds neither spoke. Then Jungkook reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, a thin bracelet with a familiar charm. Taehyung blinked in surprise. "You still have that?" he asked quietly. Jungkook didn't look at him when he answered. "I never stopped wearing it." Taehyung's expression softened, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just real. "So," he began, voice low, almost hesitant, "are we good?" Jungkook finally met his eyes. There was honesty there, raw and unfiltered. "We were never not good," he said. "We just needed time." Taehyung nodded slowly, almost relieved. Outside, fans were still screaming. Car horns echoed, cameras flashed, but inside that van, everything felt calm. Familiar. "Right?" Taehyung rested his head lightly against the seat and closed his eyes for a moment. "Then I'm back," he murmured, almost like a promise. Jungkook didn't say anything, but the faint smile tugging at his lips was more than enough, because sometimes, the most powerful answers don't need words. And in that quiet moment, with the world waiting and watching outside, It felt like something had just begun again. The car ride continued in quiet comfort, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and occasional camera flashes reflecting against the tinted windows. Taehyung slowly lifted his head and glanced sideways at Jungkook, really looking at him this time. Jungkook's jaw was slightly tense, as if he was holding back thoughts he wasn't sure he should say. His fingers tapped lightly against his knee, a habit Taehyung knew all too well. It meant his mind was racing faster than he could speak. "You changed your hair," Taehyung finally said, breaking the silence with something simple. Jungkook smirked. "You noticed?" Taehyung rolled his eyes. "Please." The whole world noticed. Jungkook chuckled softly, and the sound filled the space with a familiar warmth Taehyung hadn't realized he missed. For a moment, things felt exactly like before, effortless. Then Taehyung reached into his coat and pulled out a small black envelope. He held it out, not dramatically, just calmly. "This is for you," he said. Jungkook froze, surprised. "What is it?" Taehyung shrugged slightly. "Something I finished overseas. I didn't want anyone else to hear it first." Jungkook didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he held it in his hand like it was fragile and important. "You trust me with this?" Jungkook asked quietly. Taehyung's gaze softened. "I always did." The weight of those words lingered in the air as the van approached the private dorm entrance. The shouting outside grew louder, fans chanting their names together, not separately. It was almost poetic. When the car stopped, the manager turned to them. "Security will walk you in. Cameras are everywhere. Just stay close." The door slid open, cold air rushing inside along with voices, flashes, and chaos. Taehyung stepped out first, but before Jungkook followed, Taehyung subtly slowed his pace. Not enough for anyone to notice, except Jungkook. It was his silent way of saying, "I'm not walking ahead. Not this time." We moved together. Jungkook caught up, and for a brief moment, hidden between camera angles and flashing lights, their hands brushed. Not intentional. Not planned, but real. Fans screamed louder, convinced they saw something. Security ushered them quickly through the doors and into the quiet hallway beyond. The sounds outside faded until only their footsteps remained. Once they reached the elevator, Taehyung leaned against the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Tomorrow," he said, voice low but steady. "Let's talk properly." Jungkook nodded. "Yeah, tomorrow." The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside side by side. Not as strangers, not as distant colleagues, but as two people finally ready to face whatever comes next. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the story was only just beginning. The elevator ride felt strangely intimate despite the quiet. Soft instrumental music played faintly, something calm and melodic, but Jungkook barely heard it. His heartbeat was louder. Taehyung kept his gaze forward, eyes fixed on the rising floor numbers, but his posture wasn't cold. It was careful, as if one wrong move could break something fragile that had just begun to mend. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened to the private dorm hallway, silent, warm, familiar. It smelled faintly like coffee, fabric softener, and memories. Jungkook stepped out first, but before walking farther he turned back slightly. "You want tea? Or something?" he asked, his voice unusually soft. Taehyung raised a brow. "You're offering to make it?" Jungkook scoffed and rolled his eyes. "I can make tea, Taehyung." Taehyung smirked. "Last time you boiled water in a rice cooker." "That was one time." "That was 2 times." They stared at each other. And then laughter slipped out, unforced and real. The kind they hadn't shared in months. It felt good. Jungkook shook his head, cheeks warm. "Fine. Sit down. I'll make it properly." Taehyung walked into the living room and sat on the couch, the same one they once fought over during late-night gaming sessions. He looked around. Everything felt familiar yet different. Meanwhile, Jungkook moved around the kitchen quietly, grabbing mugs, tea bags, and hot water like he'd rehearsed it. He wasn't rushing, not tonight. When Jungkook returned, he set Taehyung's cup in front of him, then sat beside him, not too close but not distant either. A safe middle. For a while neither spoke. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was healing. Finally Taehyung broke the silence. "Do you ever think about how everything changed so fast?" Jungkook stared into his tea. "All the time." Taehyung nodded, his fingers tapping the mug lightly. "I didn't leave because of you. he said suddenly. Not harsh, just honest. Jungkook's head lifted. The kind of movement someone makes when they've waited too long to hear those words. Taehyung continued, eyes steady. I needed space, not from you but from everything. From expectations. From pressure. From pretending I was fine. Jungkook swallowed hard. I thought I did something wrong. Taehyung's eyes softened. You didn't. Silence again, but different. Heavy, emotional, necessary. Jungkook let out a slow breath. I missed you. Taehyung didn't hesitate. I missed you too. Jungkook stared ahead, voice lower now. It felt weird seeing you again today. Like we were close but not allowed to be. Taehyung leaned back on the couch, gaze thoughtful. Maybe we should stop living based on what we're allowed to be. Jungkook looked at him, really looked. What are we then? Taehyung didn't answer immediately. He took a sip of tea, set the cup down, and then met Jungkook's eyes. Something real, he said quietly. Whatever that means. Jungkook's breath caught, not from surprise but from relief. Taehyung stood up, walked toward the hallway, then paused and turned back. Tomorrow, he repeated softly. We'll figure it out. And with that, he disappeared into his room, leaving Jungkook alone in the dim living room, holding the black envelope and a racing heartbeat. Jungkook looked at the envelope again. He hesitated, then slowly, he opened it. And the first line of Taehyung's handwritten message made his eyes widen. It wasn't a lyric. It wasn't a letter. It was a question that could change everything. Jungkook froze, eyes locked on the first handwritten sentence. It was written in Taehyung's neat, slow handwriting. The kind Jungkook could recognize even in the dark. Are you sure we're just friends? His breath left him in one shaky exhale. For a moment, the room felt too quiet, too still. The kind of silence that forces every memory to resurface. Late night calls. Hands brushing but never pulling away. Shared secrets. Unspoken words, and the distance, cold, confusing, painful, suddenly made sense. Jungkook sat back, gripping the letter tighter, heart racing unevenly. He kept reading. There were so many moments where I wanted to ask you this face to face. But timing was never right. People were always watching. Or maybe I was afraid of the answer. Jungkook blinked, his throat tightening. Taehyung, afraid? He'd always seemed fearless, confident, unreadable, impossible to shake. But this letter felt raw, vulnerable, real. He continued. When we stopped talking, I thought space would make everything clearer. But instead it made everything louder. Every song reminded me of you. Every city felt empty without you there. And every night I wondered if you ever missed me the way I missed you. Jungkook had to pause because the answer was yes, too much. More than he knew how to admit. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned to the final part. So I need to know before we go back to smiling in public, before we act like nothing happened, before we become something safe instead of something honest. There was a small smudge under the final line, like Taehyung paused too long before finishing. Then the final sentence. Do you feel it too? Jungkook closed his eyes and let those words settle inside him, not as a question, but as a truth. He leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling, every emotion he had carefully buried now rising to the surface, fear, hope, longing, and something he could no longer name as anything else. There was no confusion anymore, no pretending. He felt it, deeply, suddenly. His phone buzzed beside him. A new message. From Taehyung, just 2 words. Good night, Jungkook. Jungkook typed slowly, almost afraid of how real everything had become. But he didn't delete or overthink this time. He sent the first honest response in months. Good night, Tae. And yes, I feel it too. He hit send at no hesitation and no fear. And somewhere behind the closed bedroom door, Taehyung smiled. The morning light spilled softly through the windows of the HYB dorm hallway, touching the walls with a warm golden glow. Everything looked peaceful, quiet, untouched, as if the building itself had sensed something had changed overnight. Inside Taehyung's room, his phone lit up on the bedside table. He had barely slept. Not because he was anxious, but because of one message, 8 simple words replaying in his mind. And yes, I feel it too. Taehyung sat up slowly, exhaling a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for months. The kind of breath you release only when something heavy finally lifts. Meanwhile, Jungkook stood in the kitchen, staring down at 2 mugs, one black, one cream-colored. One for him and one he hesitated to pour for someone else. He had done this before. Too many times, Even when things were tense, old habits never really left. He finally poured the second cup, steadying his heartbeat with the familiar scent of coffee. Just then, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Not rushed, not hesitant, but slow, measured, deliberate. Taehyung appeared, hair still messy from bed, hoodie hanging loose over his shoulders. His eyes met Jungkook's, and for a brief second, the world shrank down to just that moment. No cameras, no expectations, no distance. Just them. Jungkook held out the extra cup. Taehyung didn't speak, but the way he accepted it, with a small exhale almost like relief, said more than words ever could. They moved to opposite sides of the table, though neither looked away. "Did you sleep?" Jungkook finally asked. Taehyung shook his head and gave a tired smile. "Not really." "You?" Jungkook scoffed. "Barely." Silence fell again. Not uncomfortable, just fragile. Like both were afraid the wrong word could break what was finally forming. Then Taehyung placed the letter between them. Not accusingly, not with regret, but with certainty. "We should talk," he said calmly. Jungkook nodded. "Yeah, we should." Taehyung looked down at his coffee, thumb brushing the warm ceramic. "I never wrote that to pressure you," he said softly. "I just needed to be honest somewhere. Even if you never answered." Jungkook's voice came quieter than before. "But I did answer." Taehyung lifted his gaze, slow, searching, almost hopeful. "You did." Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You deserved the truth, not just a message." Taehyung listened. Really listened. Jungkook continued. "When things got complicated, I pulled back because I didn't know what to do with everything I was feeling." He swallowed. "It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I cared too much." Taehyung's fingers froze around his cup. "And I kept telling myself time would make it fade," Jungkook said, voice steady but vulnerable. "But it didn't. Not once." Taehyung blinked hard, emotion quickly building in his eyes. "So what now?" he whispered. Jungkook hesitated only for a moment, then spoke with a certainty he didn't have before. "Now we stop running from it." Taehyung's breath caught. Jungkook reached across the table, not grabbing, not forcing, just offering. Taehyung stared at his hand, then slowly, carefully, placed his own over it. Their fingers intertwined, not hidden, not avoided, not denied. Real, warm, undeniable. No cameras, no crowd, no fear. Just two people choosing honesty. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. And somewhere deep inside, quiet but undeniable, something new began. Or maybe something long forgotten finally returned.